Hello again to all my YouTube channel friends. Today's feature car is Gregg Rogers' awesome 1971 Datsun 240Z. This is a very special episode because I was able to collaborate with a new friend of the channel, Mr. Mark Lyons, webmaster of an amazingly detailed and informative website called zcarguide.com. If you have any sort of interest in these cool Japanese sports cars, you need to visit Mark's site. It's truly a labor of love, and it shows. I was recently hospitalized for 3 weeks and was unable to research and write the story for this week's feature. I found zcarguide.com and loved how accurately Mark accounts the story. I reached out to Mark and asked him if I could use his well-written account of the history of the 240Z for this story word for word. He graciously granted me permission to do so. I know to the purest journalist this is plagiarism, but I prefer to think of it as a collaboration between Mark and me under unusual circumstances. Thanks, Mark. I'll always be grateful for your help, and it's always fun to make a new friend, especially a fellow car guy. Now, on to the story. For much of the 20th century, when historic automakers such as Ford and GM reigned supreme in the American market, Japanese cars were not looked upon favorably at all. For many American consumers, the word Japanese was synonymous with cheap, rusty junk. This may still be true today, if not for one man, Yutaka Katayama, who took Nissan to new heights in the American market. It was during his formative years when Katayama was first exposed to the United States. He attended Keio University and while at school, got a job on a freighter which took him back to the United States. While the ship was being reloaded, Katayama spent months traveling the Pacific Northwest and likely beginning to fall in love with the United States. Yutaka Katayama is widely considered to be the father of the Z-car, but his beginnings at the now world-renowned automaker were not so glorious. Mr. K, as he is now affectionately known, began working for Nissan in 1935. Katayama's aggressive approach to business and marketing was often negatively received by his superiors. Katayama valued creativity and whimsy in a business environment that valued the exact opposite. Corporate Japan in the 20th century was rigid, demanded conformity, and was, well, corporate. As most stories about legendary characters like Mr. K go, it is said that as a punishment for his behavior, Nissan executives decided to send him to Southern California to do market research. If that doesn't sound like too much of a punishment to you, you're probably right. But given the business circumstances, the whole stunt was likely little more than a practical joke. Nissan had essentially no presence in this region at the time. Mr. K, however, took this as a unique challenge. Nissan executives expected Katayama to fail and return to Japan, but he did the exact opposite. He asked to remain in the US and begin to build a real presence there for Nissan. Again, Japanese vehicles were regarded with almost universal disrespect within the United States at this time. Nissan reportedly sold no more than 1,000 vehicles annually in the entire United States. Skeptical of this effort, Nissan provided Mr. K with an advertising budget of $1,000 and allowed him to continue working in the States. Mr. K had given himself a massive undertaking. He set up a small office in downtown Los Angeles and began to recruit dealers. Katayama had great plans for his U.S. expansion for Nissan. Branded as Datsun, the first of many American rebrandings led by Mr. K, the new venture proved tentative at first. Katayama would try and convince any able dealer he could to take on this new Datsun brand despite lackluster performance in the past. At one point, Katayama reportedly rounded up dealers and tried to convince all of them of the impending success they would experience as new Datsun dealers. "Everyone in this room will be millionaires," he promised them. All this work eventually paid off in 1967 when Nissan released the 510, a powerful little vehicle that came as a sedan, a coupe, or a station wagon. Nissan had high hopes for this model, already seen in the Japanese market, but had no idea how much success they would see in the United States with the 510. By 1967, Mr. K had built up a formidable collection of Datsun dealer partners and was fully prepared to unleash this new product on the American market. The 510 proved to be Mr. K's first major success. The American market loved it, and it sold extremely well. The real success, however, was that Katayama had proved himself to his new American partners. He had crafted a perfect manufacturer-dealer relationship and was inundated with potential new dealers, which was a perfect scenario for his next big project. The Datsun 240Z, the original Z car, was designed by Yoshihiko Matsuo, but the concept was all Mr. K's. Inspired by the incomparable beauty of the Jaguar XKE Coupe, which many automotive designers have taken to heart as the most beautifully proportioned sports car of all time. Like the XKE and all of the American pony cars of the mid-60s, it was a sports car with a sleek body, with a long nose and a short deck, designed so that it could be built utilizing some of the parts and components that were already in use in other production cars. And it was a car that anybody could drive easily, and that would give the driver the incredible feeling of jubilation that comes when car and driver are as one. Many people helped design and build what we all know today as the Z car, but Katayama spearheaded the effort and was its largest proponent. Katayama had high expectations for this car, that it would fulfill a need in the American market I didn't even know it had at this point. As Z cars began to arrive into the States, Mr. K had one big problem: the name. With the initial production finally completed, Nissan began shipping the first 240Zs to the United States in 1969. Every Z car that found its way into the States was branded with its Japanese moniker, the Fair Lady Z. Mr. K, having spent many years in this country, knew that this car could not be sold as the Fair Lady in the US. It needed a more American name, and certainly not something as effeminate as the Fair Lady if it was to sell at all. So Mr. K again rebranded a Nissan model for the American market. He was not one to stand by and wait. It is said that he personally ripped off the Fair Lady emblems from Z cars as they arrived into the United States, replacing them with the now iconic 240Z branding. This story may or may not be true, but it's certainly part of the celebrated legacy of Mr. K, as are many other stories, now affectionately dubbed Zlore, among the Z car faithful. The 240Z name was derived from the inline 6-cylinder engine's cubic inch displacement. The story that ensued is one we all know. The 240 took off like a rocket in the American market, and it was an immediate success. Dealers across the country had waiting lists, sometimes as much as a year long, for this stylish new sports car. In the coming years, the 240Z would transition to the 260Z, then the 280Z, and then the 280ZX, and so on. But Katayama's work was done. He retired in 1977. Mr. K's legacy was already set firmly in place, and he remained as enthusiastic a car guy as ever. Mr. K frequently traveled to Z-car events, never shy to pose for a picture with a fan or to sign an autograph. He was inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame in 1998. Katayama was a prominent figure in the Z-car community right up until the end. Mr. K passed away in 2015 at the age of 105, peacefully, with his family by his side.
He said that the vehicle was built specifically or mostly for the American market. At that time, in the late 60s, I mean, the Japanese were just really trying to up their quality of their vehicles. And then bringing the Z, it met the requirements of 85% for size of most Americans. So that's the reason why the car was so popular here. The other parts of the design, Mr. Matsuo-san and his team, they designed 5 different vehicles, Targas, kind of like a little station wagon, a racing version, a ZG. And the other thing is, the biggest thing was on the hood. He explained to us that they wanted to make it very masculine, so they put kind of a bulge there that really wasn't needed, but it kind of gave it a look. But if you look at the aerodynamics of the vehicle, it's just very unbelievable. It's from the front, all the way to the back. And of course, as always, Americans like to improve on whatever they have. So, both race car drivers like Peter Brock and others like that, they basically would add like what they called the front air dams and the rear air dams and things like that, just to make it a better handling car all the way around.
The story of the humble beginnings of Nissan in the States and how a truly legendary car came to be is a fascinating tale. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our twice weekly videos. It's free, so the price is right. Join us again this Sunday when our feature car is a bad to the bone 2010 Mustang GT Coupe. Everything is dead on with this baby. Stance, wheels, colors, and performance. It's owned by a lady who loves cars. Another great car with an interesting story. See you next Sunday.